Ladies and gentlemen, analysts and associates, welcome to your managing director secretary's favorite podcast, the Big Swinging Decks Podcast by Litquidity and Mark Moran. This is not financial advice. You'd be a bottom bucket analyst to make investment decisions based on what is discussed on this show.
Welcome back to Big Swinging Decks. Lit, how are you? How you doing this week? It's been a pretty crazy week in the world, hasn't it?
Yeah, to say the least. You know, I'm halfway across the world right now trying to unplug, but couldn't have timed it any better.
Yeah, I mean, I think before we start this off, it's probably best for us to kind of say it's a very, very strange and interesting time that's going on in the world. However, when you think about the history of the world, there's always been conflict, so can't really say it's a unique time, unfortunately. But, it really, for us, is like healthy 30-year-olds, in a country with full freedom. It's very interesting to see what's going on in Ukraine and the developments. With what's going on right now, we're seeing that like in real time in social media, which is honestly like it's fascinating, it's shocking, and it's scary.
Yeah, that's something like I enjoy watching World War II and Vietnam War type documentaries, and I think what wasn't available then was social media, and just seeing like everyone's reactions in real time and the clips of whatever's going on. It's pretty insane. And I think what's probably most fascinating is just the kind of decentralization of information that's available to people. Whereas like, back in the day, everyone just got their news from, say, like state-owned media or some major news outlets. But nowadays, regular citizens can upload anything and say whatever. So
Exactly.
You can definitely, obviously, see a lot of truth, but then there's also the manipulation of data, which is scary. But I think it just like really adds another layer to warfare.
I mean, it does. And, like I was looking at this thing online where it was, women in Ukraine are using Tinder to match with Russian soldiers. And in doing so, like, they're able, and it's not necessarily women all the time, but they're able to kind of get, okay, give me all of your social media accounts. So your Instagram, blah, 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 can kind of start to like geo-triangulate whatever. It's just a fascinating time. But I mean, for me, like we both got pretty political this week, and I usually never do, but for something like this, I'm very much pro team Ukraine and fuck Russia. And I think it's very interesting to look at it from an American perspective. So I like to add that sometimes. But I mean, it's a tough time out there. So for anyone who is listening there who's affected by this, we feel for you. And I think for the rest of us, though, it makes you be a little bit more thankful for what we're all here in America like going through, and at least we have our freedom, and that's the most important thing. So with that being said, should we get more into the podcast now?
Fuck yeah!
All right, okay, bringing the mood back up. So it's kind of heavy, right?
Yeah,
it was kind of a big week for us in terms of releasing the comp stuff on Tuesday, and I got a few New York Post headlines, huh?
Yeah, those were some good ones too. It's like I didn't even expect like the headlines to tie into what we actually did. Like the Goldman Sachs burritos.
The Goldman Sachs. Yeah, this is it's the number one most read article. And it's like great, phenomenal. But it's fun to make fun of Goldman Sachs. Like obviously for a publication like the Post, they're going to take any chance that they can get to tie it to kind of, if you're a layperson outside of finance, the most public name. So it was funny. It was good. We're gonna see if anything comes of it. I've heard from a source that David Solomon was not pleased, that he hates being called out on stuff like this, and he gets hyper focused about it. So it's going to be interesting to see what changes. But what type of feedback had you been getting from it?
Yeah. David Solomon, if you are listening to this, we'd love to have you on and have you express yourself, to your teams. And so if you're listening, which we think you will, come on.
I think there's like three options here, right? He raises, and maybe there's four, like he just raises it without interacting with us, which is fine and shows the respect for his employees that he needs to have. Two, I think he could come on here, he could talk to us about it. Three, he could come just DJ one of the parties we're going to have in the Hamptons this summer. The headlines, they're obviously, especially with a publication like The Post, like they get attention, right? Like it's funny, it's ridiculous, but also like, it gets the word out there. And I think, kind of in that tangent, we're going to be talking on this episode about our advice to juniors, to new bankers, to anyone kind of in a professional workplace. Because after putting out the survey results and kind of just general feedback we've gotten over the past few months, I guess past few weeks since we've started this, not months, but weeks, is that people wanted to hear a little bit more about our advice. And I've gotten a lot of one-off messages about, hey, what advice would you give to someone hitting the desk for the first time? Or I'm going to be a post-MBA associate. What are some pieces of advice? And so we figured we would bring that to you right now. But first, I just want to ask, you're in a kind of exotic location. Care to disclose where you are?
No, I don't care to disclose where I am. Let's just say we're a few hours apart
mysterious.
Right now. Yeah.
So mysterious. God, my boss is so mysterious.
I'm just trying to unplug from it all. This was something that...
Oh, really? You're trying to unplug from it all? Because I'm still getting harassed by you on Twitter, so it doesn't really seem like you're unplugging that much.
I mean, I did not expect to land, from this long international flight to possibly seeing World War III breaking out. But it's like I'm trying to get some drinks at the pool bar, and it's hard to just like ignore what's going on there. So it's like, hey, fuck it, whatever. I'll just
harass me.
Send you to the front lines, or just continue to voice my opinion on Twitter and be extra based.
I love it. So, I mean, this week I was in Miami with Mayor Suarez and CoinFlex. Actually, as always, this podcast is brought to you by CoinFlex US with FlexCoin, the only interest-earning stable coin out there. It's coming next month. You like that? I did. That was just off the top of my head because I forgot we have a sponsor now, and to say that in the beginning.
Yeah, well, that's we'll work on that delivery.
I thought the delivery was good. I thought the delivery was the best part. I think the content, that's questionable. Anything that comes out of my mouth, questionable. But the delivery, it'll be good.
What about that delivery of our Litquidity hat to Mayor Suarez? How'd that go down? And I'm so fucking jealous.
You saw that pic.
Yeah, I am so jealous that you got to go. Like, literally, this fucking thing was set up the day that I was flying. So, wish I could have been there, but
there'll be time in the future. We're friends of the city of Miami. They as he said to me, he goes, "Oh, love you guys." So
there you go. All right.
Yeah, and so Miami was great. There with Leslie and Mark from CoinFlex, who it's funny because a lot of what they wanted with us for the sponsorship is we're helping to act as kind of their introduction to the U.S. to explain their story, to explain everything that's going on, and while I was there, kind of helping them with the story of the company and how to explain that and what are the best ways to go about this. And one of the things is they're a husband-wife couple, and they kind of don't historically haven't made that clear. And I was like, when you think about crypto, especially a stable coin, there's all these issues of trust out there. Like you think about Tether not having as much cash and cash assets backed up that they should have for a stable coin, like all these things that if I'm my parents or something, I'm going to be concerned about. I'm like, but if you're a couple, you guys can tell this story, and give a face, two faces rather, to a product that builds trust, I think, and it goes a long way in terms of showing people who may be skeptical you're putting yourself out there behind this publicly. So it was a really cool time down there. Always, love Miami. Great weather, great people. Was in Brickell for most of it, which I honestly love that area. Like, I've usually spent time in South Beach, but Brickell was dope. I love it.
Yeah, it's like mini Manhattan.
I kind of feel like it's like Hudson Yards in 5 years. But all right, enough about us. Let's jump in, if you will, flip with us to page 69 for the next section. And this is going to be our shareholder perspectives, right? As any good pitch deck or activism, no, it wouldn't be a pitch deck. It'd be an activism deck, would have shareholder perspectives. So for this, like we said, we've gotten a lot of questions in the DMs about various forms of advice. And so we wanted to kind of just freely run through this. And I know, for me, Lit, I started as an associate. You like to say post-MBA associate. I started after my law degree and MBA, but there is an MBA in there, so I don't like to admit that. But one thing I will give you is I do think that the whole kind of idea of post-MBA associates, like that is something, that reputation is warranted. And we'll jump into that. But, I think for us, like you've been an analyst. And so in knowing what you know now with your 30 years of experience on this world, but you're 8 years removed roughly from being an investment banking analyst, right?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
When you think back to like all that you've learned and you think back to like your initial months on the desk, like what pieces of advice would you give to yourself in terms of just like, everyone always said, like the classic line when you're interviewing in banking is like, oh, it's like drinking from a fire hose, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah. Every job is because you've never done it before. But I'm curious for you, like, you go through your analyst training, right? And then you hit the desk and it's the first time that like you're in your group setting with, MDs, VPs, all that. You get your first staffing. Let's say you get staffed on a pitch for, a company that you're not familiar with at all. Like kind of what would be your recommendation to a first year analyst?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to come at the job with a ton of enthusiasm.
I think that's 90% of the job in attitude.
Yeah, it's like attitude, keeping a smile on your face, and just like a positive, hey, I'm gonna really just put some effort into actually learning about this and the process and like understanding why I'm doing this, rather than just like viewing things from the point of view of like, hey, I'm gonna do this, but I really don't give a fuck, and then I'm gonna go back to home. But I think that really just like can make or break your essentially 2 years as an analyst, if that's kind of where you're going for. And like it could be really dark if you're just viewing it as a simple job versus, hey, like I want to lay down the foundation of my long career. Let me soak up as much as I can and impress as many people as I can, and just like leave a solid reputation behind me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of would always, especially with summer interns, when they're like, oh, what can I do? And like, if you're a summer intern, honestly, the reality of it is there's not much you can do, right? And especially that's true in the beginning, whether you're an analyst or an associate. There's oftentimes not a lot that you can do in the beginning to really add value. And so attitude is always going to be the main thing. But it's a really interesting industry because most people tend to become pretty jaded pretty quickly and, really kind of just focusing on the negative. And I mean, that's something that always stuck out to me. Like, I think when I think back about banking, like what I loved the most was, being staffed on a company. I had no idea anything about the industry and being able to learn about that. I always view that as such like a privilege to have at a job, because I think most people, you're not necessarily learning anything new. And like, there are like good things about banking, there are bad things, but like, being able to learn just about like random industries, companies, shit like that. Like the electrical grid was like, it's something I never thought I'd learn about in life, like ended up like learning so much about it. And it's just like, super cool things like that. And, that's all kind of attitude driven. But, and like we've talked about this actually a little bit in the past where like, I feel like we probably took different approaches where like you said, publicly on the record, you were a top bucket analyst. I would say like, I was, in terms of PowerPoint, very good. In terms of my technicals, like above average, but like not as good as like someone who had started off as an analyst at Centerview, then become an associate. And I kind of always knew like attitude would be what would carry me over the top, and work ethic. And so, I think like one of the main things to do is like when you first get staffed on something or hit the desk, you really want to kind of just try to learn as much as you can from others, to be asking questions. So whether you're an analyst and you're staffed with a second year analyst, or an associate and you're staffed with, a second or third year associate, it's really important to just kind of like watch what they're doing and all the deal processy things, and kind of like just get your feet under you. But it's literally all about attitude in the beginning, and just realizing like, okay, there's so many pieces to this. Control what you can control, because a lot of it you're not going to be able to control.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's very dependent on the team dynamic that exists in the job you're at. So like, just I'd say like when I was an analyst, you
about to say where you worked right there. You almost messed up.
No, I worked in a pretty big team environment, and then having moved to a very tiny private equity team, it's just like learning just how to pivot to a small, working team environment, very flat. I think that was where I was like, fuck, like there's no room to hide in terms of like the interest that you have in something. It's like you got to really just like bring it, and if you're not fully bought in, then you're gonna have a hard time. And so I think that's one thing people do really have to understand very early on. It's kind of like, I equate it to like when you're going through picking out a college, everyone's like, well, what kind of person are you? Are you looking for a party scene? Are you looking for something in the middle of nowhere, or like a big city? And
I was just looking for wherever would accept me, honestly.
Right, same here. And so like I think a lot of people see that in going into investment banking, or just getting their foot in the door on any firm in Wall Street. But then once you start getting the real experience, you're like, well, I don't know. I think I want a bigger team, or I think I want a smaller team. And like you really then just find the environment that works best for you, and naturally will gravitate towards that.
Yeah, and I think too, like, oftentimes it's underestimated by juniors how much, their attitude with their associate affects a deal team. Like, there was one analyst who I really enjoyed working with, who he'll know who he is in listening to this, but I felt that like our dynamic was so great because we had worked together previously, that we were able to kind of take control of the whole team's dynamic and, really make it kind of a fun atmosphere that like we're working hard, we're learning, but, we're all kind of like dedicated to the same mission. And like, you're able to, I think the main thing that I wanted to really stress in terms of like this podcast and our advice is that when you start, and this isn't any job, like you think the managing director, the partner, whoever it is, whatever industry it is, they're the most intimidating person in the world to you. And they're really not. Like they used to be you, and it's tough to kind of put yourself in their shoes and visualize that. But once you're able to realize like, okay, like this person, like they went through what I went through, like there's still part of them that can relate to me and stuff. And like, always make an effort to like get to know someone kind of firsthand, like their story, their background, and really be able to use that to your advantage to personify someone. Because I think like in banking, it's so easy, just we all have these transactional interactions, and it's rare to have like good one-on-one interactions in banking with superiors, but there is that room for potential. And I think like, if you're just going to approach it with like a 2-year mentality of like, I'm going to go in, get out, without being like, hey, there's a lot of stuff here for me to learn in all facets, like just not only in the technical ability, but also, in the network that you're building. Like it's always just best to kind of like keep your head on a swivel. And like, for anyone, like, dude, it's tough to like maintain optimism in life and like not just be a negative, individual like in your 20s and just, turn into that and just try as long as you can to hold out, like isn't it weird like seeing that happen?
Yeah. And I think like a lot of people just turn to, I think, we kind of touched upon this in our episode on mental health. So if anyone wants to go back to that episode, go to one of our first episodes that we put out there, and we touched upon this. But people will go to the bar and fucking obliterate their fucking
lit. They'll get lit AF.
They'll get lit AF RN. And,
right now, I love it.
Yeah, but that's like people just find an outlet that way, and I think hey, people want to work hard, people want to play hard, and I think that's kind of like a prevalent mentality on Wall Street. So it's definitely just hey, never get to the point where you think you fucking hate the job, and that's like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. There's always something else you can do.
Yeah, and kind of, jumping off of our mental health stuff, because I think that episode in and of itself, like, talks a lot about these things. In terms of, like, practical things, one of the things I think is the most helpful that, whether you're a new analyst associate, is that in the beginning, and especially as a summer analyst, when you're working and you're done with a task and you have some downtime, open up an old version of a model for the deal you're working on and try and be recreating it in your own free time, because that's how you're going to work the best. Like, especially if you're an associate, like checking a model is very, very different than building a model. And if you can't build build the model yourself, you're not going to be able to check the model. And so, like, for me at Centerview, I mean, I didn't do this at Lazard because I wasn't experienced enough, but like at Centerview, I would always like to just set up the structure of the model, or at least talk through it for an extended period of time so that it was exactly what I wanted it to be. And that when I was checking through, it was like I made it or I made it, so that you constantly remain in control. Because I think, like, when you think about it from an associate perspective, like, you're, the quarterback of the deal, as they say, like when you're recruiting, which is like bullshit, because it's like fucking, doing Excel is nowhere related to, like, getting hit by an NFL lineman and having to decide how to throw a ball in 3 seconds. But, we're athletes. It's something that, like,
Excel god, dude.
But there's kind of this whole idea of, like, okay, if you're an associate and your analyst gets removed from the account, staffed on something else, they leave to go to PE, like, you're still in charge, and so you're always going to want to be knowledgeable and have that model like you built it. And if you can, he who controls the model controls the deal, as they say. As I just said right now, that was good. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, okay, that's going to be the title of this episode. And it's funny, though, because, like, dude, you love to shit on post-MBA associates. Like, I don't even like to, like, say that I have an MBA, because, one, it was a total joke. I didn't learn jack shit. I learned so much in law school, but nothing in business school. It's like, I already know how to network. Don't need to be taught that. That's all you learn. But, it's true, because, like, you have so many people come in, and there's posts left and right on Wall Street Oasis about this. So, like, let's do the post in real life, because, like, there's so many post-MBA associates who they come and they think that they can jump in immediately and delegate work and manage an analyst. Especially, like, the funniest dynamic is, like, someone fresh out of, like, Columbia Business School, blah, blah, blah. Like, the profile we described last time, like, state school undergrad, did consulting for 3 to 5 years, then they go to Columbia, think they're, like, hot shit, and then it's like you're at a major bulge bracket, Deutsche Bank, Barclays, whatever. They get staffed on the first deal, coverage group, and then they're trying to, like, basically, like, manage the second-year analyst who already has a PE offer. And it's like, that talk about reality TV about to happen, that's that.
Yeah, it's like the Pokemon moves. It's like not very effective, right? You're not going to fucking get a second-year analyst to respect you if you think just coming in fresh from business school and trying to run shit when the experienced analyst can already run circles through you, has been doing exactly the job, for a year or plus, and just knows the dynamics, knows where kind of the skeletons are buried, which could be me referring to Excel models, but it also could be
a lot of things.
Real fucking skeletons if you're at the right bank.
There's some fucked up shit that's happened at a lot of places, but like, it kind of goes, and like, you're touching on this without saying it, but like, when you do this, you have to, like, really commit 100% as an analyst or an associate, that, like, this is it, like, this is just what I'm going to throw myself into. And I always kind of viewed this as, you're starting, and you're, like, for me, coming from, law school and business school, like, I was starting as an analyst, and that's how I'd view it mentally, rather than being like, okay, I'm an associate. It's like, okay, well, like, I don't know shit about fuck right now. And I mean, I did do 2 internships at Credit Suisse prior, so, like, I had a good idea, but, like, going from a coverage group at a bulge bracket to just, pure M&A at Lazard, very different. And so, when you approach it as kind of like, okay, for me, I'm going to be as humble, which, like, not my strong suit, but, like, as humble as I can on this, but I'm really going to, like, make friends. Shut up. I'm going to make friends with the analyst and really try and learn from them. I'm not going to learn from the associate. I'm going to learn from the analyst, because if I'm going to be a leader, like, I'm going to need to be able to go in and to do all the stuff in the model, to understand all that. Otherwise, why should I be leading someone else? And I think a lot of people forget that step. But that's true, like, any facet of corporate life. Like, if you can't do the task that you're asking someone to do, you shouldn't be asking someone else to do it. You should be asking how to learn it from someone else.
For sure. That is spot on, Mark.
Nice. But, I think, like, after this kind of, let's call it, like, first 6 months, right? Like, after the first 6 months, you kind of got your feet under you. You're, like, figured it out a little bit. And then I think, like, this is just, knowing you, this is, like, I feel like where you would excel, where, the whole idea of, like, you're working smarter, not harder, right? And you're kind of figuring out the best ways to do things, to make tasks not duplicative, to just, like, get in, do great work, but also make it so you're not doing duplicative work or wasting your time.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was
your specialty, right? Like, I feel like you're good at that.
I'm a natural procrastinator, and one of the interesting things that I learned through that, or at least the way that I justify procrastinating, is I will try to find the laziest way to do something and do it as efficiently as possible. So I put as little effort needed to do that task. And I think that just gets to, efficiency, right? It's like working smarter. I used to spend a lot of time up front just laying out the groundwork, like building out some complex type of dynamic spreadsheet or whatever. I was like, dude, like, what are you doing? Just fucking plug this or that or whatever. It's like, okay, just you wait, right? We're eventually going to need something. And so like I would do that. And then, a couple weeks into whatever assignment there is, it's like, oh, hey, look, I fucking automated this. So all you have to do is click a few buttons and hit F9 on Excel, and you got everything going. So I think that's just one thing. So I'm like, hey, I don't want to fucking do this 10 times over.
Yeah, and like the one point you said though is kind of taking a step back and thinking in the beginning, like, for people who are so smart and detail oriented and all that shit, like I find like oftentimes like we forget, like we're so and probably because the majority of people are on Adderall or Vyvanse, depending on like if you're generic or what, but people get hyper focused, right? And you think about the thing that is immediately in front of you rather than the bigger picture. And I think that's what separates a good versus great junior banker, is that being able to like appreciate, like you're saying, like, oh, let me think about what we're going to need in the future, how to build this model out so that will be adaptable in the future. Like there was this guy who I worked for who he's managing director now, and like, I mean, he was intense, but we would spend like an hour or two in his office prior to like even starting work on any, like even opening an Excel to think and walk through. And he's using all of his experience that he's built to that point to think, okay, like here's where from a high level, from a deal perspective, here's where the deal could go. Here's the options we need to be thinking about. So when we're thinking about, okay, here, it could be an RMT, it could be this, blah, blah, blah. Then you're thinking about, okay, then we're going to take that knowledge and we're going to apply that and see how we build the model in a way that we'll be able to get to that point if we need to, rather than just saying, like because the senior MD, they'll be like, yo, do a DCF on this. And it's like, well, it's going to get to a point where it's like way more than just this, right? And so how do we, think about this? But it's the thought, like you're saying, that saves you so much more time in the future by having that thought in the beginning.
Just to tie up the point on working smarter, not harder, there is one associate that when I was an analyst, it just had a terrible reputation. Yeah, this guy would essentially just like justify his salary, or at least this is how I think he thought about it, just by doing as much work as possible and staying as late as possible in the office, just like pure FaceTime guy, but really got nothing fucking done, like, for 10 hours in the day. And like, I mean, I'll never forget, like, just seeing some guy who's like, dude, I'm so busy. And like, just always complaining to everyone. Like,
yeah,
it's so busy.
I'm jammed.
And like, I remember just one time going up to him, and he has fucking ESPN open on his on his computer, just like,
classic.
Yeah, so busy. Oh shit. Oh, it's you. Hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, what the hell are you doing? And like, he'd spend like time just looking at flights to take a vacation on, and like all day just doing nothing. And then one day was like, I don't know, this was like around midnight. He's like, all right, let's get to work. I'm like, dude, what the fuck have you been doing all fucking day?
Yeah, and I mean, people, it's like, I would always fucking hate, like, during the day when people are, like, making it a social event. Like, dude, like, no offense, like, I'm paid to hang out with you. Like, I'm not trying to, like, hang out with, like, my fucking, like, associate friends at Lazard Healthcare, like, I'd rather pay money not to hang out with those people. So, like, I'm not going to sit and just walk around Rockefeller Center with, like, my cock in my hand for, 45 minutes, an hour, like, getting coffee every day. And it's just, like, people, the weirdest thing to me about banking, because, like, my dad wakes up at 3:30. My mom woke up at 4:15 every morning, like before she retired. Like, dude, the people don't get into work till like 10 o'clock. And it's like AM. And it's like, no fucking shit, we're here all night because everyone's fucking getting here at 10 o'clock. and then you jerk off, have coffee for an hour, and then, it's like we're working at 11 a.m. Like, what the hell? So there's a lot of things you can do that can be a little bit more efficient. And I was thinking when we were having kind of like, I think it's really important, like you're saying, to just think a little bit more in the beginning about stuff. But, in general, organization is something that's so key, right? Like it's really can kind of make or break you. And I know I would always like, I had like actually like a set kind of draft of something I would send someone new I was working with or a summer intern of like helpful things. And one was always about email folder organization. It's like, you gotta like from day one, organize your emails. Otherwise, like it's going to be a disaster. And it's one of those things like you're saying, if you don't take the time to do it in the beginning, it's going to fuck you up in the end.
Were you one of those email zero peoples where it's like, I cannot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I still, but I mean, I'd have them categorized though, like, because, you're still going to have some you have to reply to, but I would have it in like different priority inboxes for things. Like, that's what I do now. Although, like, now with what we do, it's way tougher to fucking organize an inbox, as you know. It's not easy. But so I would always have none in banking. Now I'm good if I have like 20. I've like my anxiety's down if I only have 20. But, it's tough. And so it's like the organization is so key because oftentimes you're going to be, called on to talk about something very specific in a meeting or, really kind of bring up some detailed analysis from XYZ ago. So understanding where things are, like from setting up the folders to how we're going to save things to just, really, really being in control of that, like that makes it so much better. Because there's nothing worse, like, as I'm sure getting staffed on something and then seeing all the legacy stuff and that it's just organizationally a horrible, horrible mess.
Yeah, I think folder management is critical. And I think like dating it the right way and maybe like explaining what the engagement is and just like being able to find things, as you said, right? Like just keep it as organized as possible. It'll make everyone's lives better. And just thinking ahead too, if someone else is in your shoes and you don't want them to fucking be like, well, where do I find this? Or where's this model buried or whatever? And I think that was one thing just, on this whole organization point, that what I did when I was an analyst was I had my own personal folder in the team drive, and I would put any little thing that I found interesting or as like a possible future resource into my own personal folders, where it was like, here's my LBO model template that I like or that I built for something. Same thing with some slides.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, it's like, here's a DCF that I like. Here's an example football field, EBITDA bridge, etc. And like being able to do that. Oh, okay. Well, someone needs to do that. I know from my own personal folders where I can pull that, and it's like, wow, like so resourceful, whatever. And I think like I actually had associates that like saying, hey, dude, can I actually just like get a link to your folder so that I can see like all the templates you got there? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Just and so after I left, people were like, dude, your folder's still used. This is like, it's like a resource.
That's
I'm like,
funny.
Dude, yeah, why not just like fucking tell everyone or do it yourself? So I think like compartmentalize everything that you have into folders and try to just call upon it as easily as possible.
Yeah, and I think that is such great advice. And I was kind of thinking right now as you're saying that, I was like, what would be like the 3 best pieces of advice that I could give? So that would be one of them, just kind of broadly grouping everything under organization. I would say number 2, one thing, and I forget who I learned this from, but it was keeping a list of mistakes. And like, I think we could both sit here and be like, oh yeah, I was like the best banker ever, blah, blah, blah. But like we'd be doing a disservice. Like frankly, like there were a lot of times I fucked up. There's a certain, we'll call it VP out there who is probably laughing at me talking about this, just having worked with we all make mistakes. Like we all fuck up. And the issue in banking, but I mean,
no, I'm
dude,
kidding,
you're right. That's the
I
thing.
fucked
Like,
up too. Yeah.
There was a guy that actually, one of the most successful, I can't say the specific industry, one of the most successful bankers out there right now, he would infamously claim that he never made a mistake in banking. And it's like, dude, like
bullshit. Yeah.
bro, I've like seen 3 today, right? And so, but that's kind of the attitude that you oftentimes have to have in a client services business sometimes, or when you're selling things.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think, like we're saying, we could sit here, we could say all that shit, but like we all make mistakes, right? And it's okay to make a mistake. There's nothing ever wrong with making an honest mistake, but there is something wrong with making that mistake, 3 times, right? It's okay to fuck up. It's not okay to continuously have the same fuck up. And by keeping a list of all your fuck ups, it's like you can kind of, one, it'll be more in the front of your head, but 2, you'll be able to run through that and be like, okay, before I'm about to send this to a client, like let me do X, Y, Z, check, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And you just have it on your desk. And like, I think that was something that was really helpful for me.
That's fucking smart. Yeah. I guess like that was sort of a mental checklist that I used to have where, say for example, you're going to send a big email. And one thing someone told me was just like, put some like string of like random letters in the to field so that like, if you accidentally hit enter to send, it'll give you an error message so that you're like, oh fuck, like I forgot to attach this file, and that kind of stopped you from actually sending it. So that was like one little thing, but it was like, just a checklist of, all right, let's make sure I didn't do this, make sure I actually attached the file, make sure I did whatever. And that's honestly smart. I never wrote that down, and I think I did do some fuck ups like that, but
right. Well, it's funny though, because you said the fact that like having the mental checklist, I definitely had a mental checklist of this, but what I realized though for a lot of like checklists and process oriented stuff in banking is that in the kind of heat of the moment, you think, okay, I'm going to remember this for the future, blah blah blah. But it's when you've been working for so long, and then you haven't slept much recently, and that you just kind of you go on autopilot and you forget these simple things. Like that's why I had to start like, and because I fucked myself over enough times. It's like, okay, we're writing this down. Like now, I'm not as smart as I seem, or at least, when I'm sleep deprived, I'm not as smart as I seem. Like it's best to just write stuff down and have lists.
Yeah. The most fuck ups come because of sleep deprivation and just like doing
exactly,
all these things. Yeah, like
it's not rocket science.
3 a.m. Yeah, so that's honestly hard.
Yeah, which is like good, and I'm glad like we're able to kind of say this comment, because I think that like shit like this is like how like your kind of folder organization, like saving down the DCF, like that's the stuff like no one really talks about. I've found oftentimes, or like just takes the time to sit down with you, when you're new, because everything's so busy, everything's so time important. It's like end of the day, the deal, it's gonna get done. Like spend an hour, sit down with someone, take the time in the beginning. There was an incident with, and so actually like tonight I'm going to a former analyst's birthday, and we become like great friends since we started working. But we got staffed on like the largest deal in the healthcare group at Lazard at the time, when it was over a holiday break, and I was a first year, like ending my stub year associate. This kid was a first year analyst, and he was horrible, and I probably was not that great either. And it was a very important deal for the specific MD in this group and for the group overall. And so there was a second year analyst who he was going to leave to go to private equity. And basically at one point, like after the first year analyst had kind of like screwed up a little bit, the MD wanted to take the model away and have the second year analyst control it. And I had to like go meet, I remember like the walk we had with this kid where it's like, yo, look, to the first year, like, hey, if we let the second year take control of this, you're not going to have the learning experience that you're going to need. It's going to create more issue for me, because once he leaves, there's going to be, so many fuck ups of you having to take control of everything. So I'll talk to the managing director, push back on this, keep you in control of the model. But like, yo, we gotta start getting this tight and better. And we did that, and, spoke to the MD, took that risk of like pushing back a little bit, and like it worked out great. Kid became so much better at the job, and I became better in the process. But it was one of those things, like you kind of have to think about, you spend that time in the beginning to think about how things turn out in the end, and it goes so much better than not putting thought into it, right?
Yeah, that all makes sense. That's the right way to go about it.
So Lit, one thing that I'd love, and the shareholders would love your perspective on, because I feel like we've given like 2-3 really good pieces of advice right now, and I'd love to give a third. Who knows how insightful we are? Everyone always, it's like on Twitter, people, it's like they're like thought boys, and it's like, bro, like I'm not trying to hear your thoughtful thought on something. Like I'm trying to laugh right now. Yeah. So my thought though is I want to hear your thoughts on kind of, when you're an analyst, right? So when you're basically, you get there and everyone has their own different ways of communicating and stuff like that, obviously, and everyone has their own biases, blah, blah, blah. But how would you kind of handle communication as an analyst? Because obviously it's something that it changes over time, like from when you first start to then by the time like you have a PE offer and you're ready to get out. But I think, direct communication is key to anything in life, whether it's banking or relationship, what have you. But for you, like, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on, this idea of kind of communication with your associate as an analyst, with your VP, with your MD. Like, talk to us about that.
Yeah, I would say I always heard, communicate. It's like, I just have this etched in my mind from this one fucking guy who's so annoying. But honestly, it's so like true, right? Like you just need to communicate with your team what's going on. If you're tied up with something, just like literally like make it so fucking well known that you're going to be tied up on something so that another team can actually like, either anticipate that or rework staffings or something, right? It's like some people, some analysts, and honestly, I was probably falling more in this bucket myself, was just like, you're so deep into something that you just forget to tell other teams that you're working with that you're going to be tied up, or, you take on something else and you just like, we'll get to it when you get to it, but some, it's like you have conflicting deadlines, and it's like, like you really just have to say, just again, communicate and make sure everyone knows what you're doing at all times. It's better to do that and be annoying than, just cruising in the background and then, hey, where is this? Like, oh, fuck, you haven't even touched that? Why didn't you fucking tell me, right? I think that's worse than being, labeled as someone who's maybe a little annoying and like, man, this guy just fucking keeps emailing me or Slack, or messaging me on whatever thing that you're on. So that's kind of what I think in terms of communication. But I'd also just say, like being as honest as possible too, and just being real, like a human, where I think like, it's so easy to treat interactions as transactional, where it's like, all please find attached or, whatever. But it's just like, hey, like, just talk to people like a normal human, and they'll respect you. And I think that just like creates, a two-way dialogue that they'll also tell stuff to you or be truthful or give you feedback. So I think that's, those are the two things around communications that I would just stress.
And it's like everyone's always like, over-communicate. But that's an easy thing to say. It's a harder thing, to be the senior person saying that and then having that happen, right? And, you kind of have to like always remember that and put yourself in someone else's shoes. And what you were saying is interesting because it brings up two specific examples to me. And so one is, I remember this was pretty early on in my time that there was a second-year analyst, and so he was taking a vacation, and so he had sent an email like early in the week, call it Monday, and that he is going to be out of office from Saturday to whenever the next week. So then he follows up on Wednesday. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, second follow-up to, and it's, kind of a BCC to everyone he's working with, right? Like all, as a reminder, I'm going to be gone, blah, 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 XYZ. Right. And then he did it again on Friday. And I was like, man, 3 emails for, and then, and thinking about it, it's like that's great because, you can't say to anyone, hey, well, I sent an email, because you can easily say, okay, I missed 1 email, right? I had no idea X was going on. You sent 3 like over a week. That's like a very smart way to effectively communicate and to be clear to everyone on your team. And I think that's just a super simple thing to do, but very, very helpful to everyone you're working with. And in thinking about that reminds me of a situation with myself where I was like trying to go to France with a girl I was dating at the time, and like for it to be like my first vacation. I didn't really effectively communicate because I thought like a certain thing was going to happen at deal. So I'm like, like I'll tell the person, like, make it, a thing later. Deal, obviously kicks into overdrive. So then I knew I could go, and it becomes like a whole issue in terms of like I didn't effectively communicate. So, to get like my tickets reimbursed and shit like that. And it was stupid on everyone everyone's end for the most part, but it was like more one of those things where if I had been clear and effective, like this analyst example of sending 3 emails of saying, hey, XYZ, and it's tougher the more unstructured environment you're in. Because like if you're at a typical bulge bracket, you can just go into some function on, whatever program you have, select the days you're going to be gone. No one can send you emails that day, like easy. But if you're somewhere where there's no strict policies, that's tougher, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one thing. And I think, like we've talked a lot about a few really, really good things, but I want to tell you like one of my favorite pieces of advice that I loved to give to people. Cause like, so for me, I'm not like the best at math, right? Like I would never say I was a mathlete, that I was a scholar or anything. And like, even now as we're doing this, I was trying to see if my bet on the Florida Gators versus Georgia Bulldogs in basketball was over what I bet on. And it was, but like doing the mental math, like I'm just not a mental math guy, right? So, it creates an issue in banking sometimes because you got to be a mental math guy or girl or, whatever your pronouns are, because we're a woke podcast, right? Right, Lit?
Right.
But so one of the tricks is to do the math of what you think the questions will be beforehand in a meeting. So, you do it all out being like, okay, if the managing director were to say, okay, well, if we change this to a 12-time multiple from a 10-time or whatever, what would that be? To kind of walk through those scenarios in your head, because one, it allows you to think through what's going to be discussed in the meeting, the different directions the meeting could go. So you'll be prepared with the analysis with what you need to, support the senior people. But two, then when someone says, okay, what is this, math equation? Then you'd sit there and you would have already done it beforehand, having kind of thought through it, anticipated, and then you pretend to do the mental math. So you're like, well, it's carry the 1, and I always like put my finger out and like pretend I was doing math in there, but I knew the answer the whole time. So then you say it, and then people are like, oh, that guy's good. Like he gets what's going on. And hilarious.
Yeah, I think I used to do that for some interview questions where it's kind of like, the vault guides like give you these standard brain teasers or other like math questions, and I think like those were like, oh well, then carry the 3 and divide by 4 and whatever, and you get to that. So, but I never recall doing that in like an actual client setting. But I will say what is a good it is a good piece of advice. Everyone always has like that what is it, the HP 12C calculator, with the reverse Polish notation, and like everyone's kind of like, who the fuck uses this?
What is that? What happened to the regular Polish note? Like I don't even know what the regular Polish notation's doing.
Hey, I don't know. I'm not a historian. The best thing that you could do as an analyst with a calculator is just simply having it on you. And so like I think this was something where
I bring it I had a monogram calculator. I bring that shit on dates.
Yeah. But like, when you're in a client setting, right, and you're like going through something,
the client needs it now.
The client needs it now. But the most impressive thing is when someone's like, does anyone have a calculator? And you just whip out your fucking calculator, slide it across the board table, and your MD just does the quick calculation to get like to an IRR or whatever. It's like, damn, you just fucking saved the day. Like that's
it's
the real
like the
use
American
of it.
Psycho scene, the business cards, just like, yeah. Let's see what Paul Allen has.
Exactly.
No, exactly. And also, too, it's such a power move. Like when an MD knows how to use that, can just like immediately do it, right? Because like they've been around since prior to Excel. That's real back of the envelope math. One of the things. So we've been chatting for a while now, and so I feel like summary takeaways, right? Like it's the organization, number one, kind of keeping a list of mistakes as well, being able to effectively communicate and over communicate in an effective way to be duplicative. All these like bankerisms. It's like, we don't want you to stay up all night, but we do want you to get granular. Don't spin your wheels, but please do have this, on my desk by 8 a.m. in the morning. And it's just like, what the fuck did you just tell me to do? Like, cause I'm still lost. Yeah. So it's always about asking questions and, really making people be explicit. Cause I think, especially for VPs, like I love on FinTwit, this war against VPs that's going on. I'm super supportive of it. It's like, let's do the war against VPs, then let's get the meal stipend increased. That's our service for the community. But, it's always a VP somebody who's like, they think I effectively communicate. I'm super clear. And it's like, dude, like you're not. And you have to realize like a lot of people at that level think they're something that they're not. So it's always better to ask more questions, annoy someone in the beginning, like Lit was saying, taking more time in the beginning to do something than having it, fuck you at the end. So I think there's a lot here. And, one of the things, though, is I kind of wanted to just conclude with something that made me laugh, that this is my favorite tweet from FinTwit of the week. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So this is from EBITDs, which is like the at EBITDs, nuts.
These nuts!
And his name, though, or her, I don't know, Finance Broheim. And this is the tweet, and it comes 1:49 a.m., on Thursday night. So someone's working, right? So then they go, you're in the shower jerking off. I'm in the shower thinking about how $10 of additional depreciation affects the 3 financial statements. We are not the same. How good is that?
I've definitely been there.
in the shower, just like, man, how does it affect this? What happens?
No, I mean, you crank it out and you think about that at the same time. Now that's real Sigma grind set mentality.
Sigma. And okay, so for people who don't know what Sigma grind set mentality, because I had to Google that. Why don't you please explain, and can you do it in a context of the self-storage guy on Twitter?
Oh God, no! Look, I'll just say it's about being a fucking woke, not woke. You're just a fucking savage Chad, and all you think about is fucking money, fucking, and just getting your point across as alpha as possible.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I think that's the perfect way to close this out.
I agree. I think that's the perfect way to close it out, Lit. With that being said, in conclusion, when all is said and done, at the end of the day, it's been a pleasure. It's been a privilege. I'm looking forward to talking with you at the next podcast.
Oh, yeah. And I will be going back to the pool bar shortly after this to get fucked up.
I love it. Lit AF. All right. To our shareholders, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
This has been Big Swinging Decks by Litquidity with your hosts, Lit and Mark Moran. This is a Red Rock Music podcast and is powered by Acast. Our executive producer is Red Yoakum. Our associate producer is Emma Martins. For more, follow us on Instagram at Litquidity and at It's Mark Moran, or visit the official website liquidity.co. So tune in weekly to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.